Yeah. All right. Welcome to the Get Hoptimized Podcast. I am Chris, your host, and today we're taking a trip down to Texas to explore Texas craft beer. And we are joined by two amazing guests from the Texas Brewers Guild. We have Caroline Wallace, who's the executive director of the Texas Brewers Guild. And also with us is Chris Troutman, who's a guild member and the co founder and head brewer at Goodline Beer Co. in Lubbock, Texas. Welcome to the show, y'all. It's good to have you here.
Thank
Thanks,
you for having
Chris.
us.
Of course, we were talking about before I got on the before we started recording. I was like, yeah, I lived in Texas for a while and loved the beer down there. I was kind of in the Dallas Fort Worth area, not quite to Lubbock, but hung out, drank a lot of great beer, and I always love chatting with people from that neck of the woods. So thank you both very much for being here, and this should be a fun convo for us. Um, so let's figure out who y'all are. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, how you got into the industry, how you started brewing, where the guild came into this factor. Give us the story. And I don't know who wants to go first, but I'll let you guys figure it out.
Ladies first.
All right. Yeah. So my name's Caroline Wallace. I'm the executive director of the Texas Craft Brewers Guild. I've been with the Guild now for over 10 years. I started as our events manager, eventually became our deputy director. Then when our previous ED retired a few years ago, I became our executive director. I got my start in this industry. Funny enough, when Chris talks, you'll find that there are some parallels. But I used to work full time in the film and video industry. Produced and worked as a production coordinator on commercials and some independent films and things like that. But beer was my passion and my hobby, and I was a beer blogger and a beer writer, and did some social media for some breweries and folks in this space. And then that was how I really got familiar with the scene and the culture and kind of wormed my way into a full-time job. So at the end of the day, a lot of the things that we do at our work with the Guild, particularly on the event side, had a lot of parallels to the film and television industry, just people, equipment, locations, getting everyone to the place to put on the event. So that was kind of how I found my foothold. And it's been a really great community to be a part of.
Funny enough, craft beer is becoming an event centric kind of business and industry. You got to host all these things and run production and coordinate artists. It's like, a lot of folks are like, I just wanted to brew beer and now I'm running events. So it's a natural fit, especially from the guild. I could see that. Chris, what about you, man? How'd you get into this and what's your story so far?
Um, yeah, I went to school for mass comm journalism. When I was doing that, did a final project for my master's project that I actually went and met some brewers and took some video and put together a small documentary, built a Flash site. I don't know if y'all remember Flash.
I
Anyway,
do.
through doing that, realized that the brewing scene was really cool. I was already into beer, but then had not really known any of the local brewers. And then kind of parlayed that project into a blog, did a lot of video on YouTube at the time. And that's when I met Caroline. We were kind of both in the same circles at that point. Uh, Rotated that over into doing a magazine. Me and three other partners founded Austin Beer Guide, is a full print color magazine, or a print, a perfect bound print full color magazine. Sorry, I haven't finished my coffee today. Um, and then yeah, from there kind of did a lot of collaboration brewing with different brewers here in Texas. Saw a lot of them kind of how they opened up from like their origin stories. And we were home brewers, the same as a lot of them. They were in the same brew club, the Austin Zealots, as several of the breweries that are around now. And ended up going to open our brewery in Austin in 2011. And then me and my partners all had children at the same time. So took about a 5, 6 year break. And when we came back to fire it back up, the real estate scene in Austin had kind of really skyrocketed. And it really wasn't tenable to open it there. And additionally, there were already several great breweries and didn't really feel like we could bring anything unique to the scene there. Really loved Austin, but had connections here to Lubbock through me and my partner. Both of our wives had gone to Tech. My wife's family's out here and been visiting Lubbock for several years. It was dry up until 2008. So kind of seeing the
Oh, wow.
scene kind of really quickly catch up out here. And it back in 2017, when we first started thinking about Lubbock, It had a lot of the same kind of hallmarks as what Austin had back in 2005, 2006, kind of when the second wave of breweries kind of came about there. So we realized it was a good time to be here. Like a lot of coffee roasters, local restaurants, wineries, all the precursors for craft beer scene. Pretty much everything go to brewery. So yeah, we moved out here, quit jobs, sold houses, and yeah, started putting together a brewery, and then got hit by a pandemic. Luckily, had not opened before it, so we were able to keep jobs and homes, and not have opened up and closed immediately. They ended up opening up the summer of 2022. So we've been, yeah, rocking and rolling since then.
Relatively new. Well, at least open. You're not new to the industry and your involvement in planning, but relatively new. You kind of see that post COVID, is like this mark in history. And somewhat now that you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm kind of familiar with that zone. So if you're not familiar with Texas, Lubbock is kind of up in the northwest side of the state, and then Dallas is in
Panhandle,
the
yeah.
Panhandle up in that zone. And we did some work for a brewery in Cisco, Texas, out there. Red Gap was a brewery out there, and it went out that way. And then Lubbock is kind of northern, further up there towards New Mexico, and uh, Arizona is up in that direction. I guess New Mexico is in between Arizona and there. I don't know. We're not in a geography podcast, folks.
Yeah.
But that's rad. Congratulations on starting. And Texas is such a huge place. You could spend like a whole day driving across the entire state, and you get these pockets like Austin, Dallas, Lubbock. And then there's everything on the east side towards Louisiana and all that. From your guys' perspective, what's going on and in the industry in Texas? Is it really a bunch of micro industries, or is there a cohesive vibe to everything, or is it kind of a mixed bag all over the place? What's the take on that?
Texas is a big state. I think everybody knows that, but high population, high, big land area. We tend to rank in the top five or top 10 when it comes to most of the good things in craft beer. We have over 440 breweries in the state, so that puts us at sixth in the country. $4.7 billion in economic impact from the craft brewing industry. That puts us in third. I think we're fourth when it comes to like barrels of craft beer produced. But something interesting, being such a big state, is we're 48th when it comes to breweries per capita. So big state, high population state. There are cities that have a lot of craft breweries in the major metro areas, but there are also pretty good sized cities and towns that might have one brewery or no brewery for many miles in any direction. So I think breweries in Texas, and I'm sure we'll get into some of this, are going through some of the same challenges as breweries in most markets. But there's still a lot of untapped growth potential in Texas. If the market can continue to develop and if our laws can continue to evolve in a positive direction. So that's a lot of the work that we do as a guild for sure.
Mhm.
Culturally, I'd say we have a really friendly brewing industry, and the fact that folks are so collaborative and lift each other up, and the guild can kind of be an organized embodiment of that, I think has been a testament to how much our industry's grown and how much folks are open to sharing with one another. But definitely different vibes in different parts of the state. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's becoming a little more cohesive across the state now. But for a while there was it's pretty spread out with a different scene and a different vibe in Houston than there was in Austin, than there was in DFW, than whatever was happening in San Antonio, and then kind of speckled with a whole bunch of breweries kind of outside of the Texas Triangle in the rural areas, which are rural but also not that rural. We have a whole lot of like Lubbock is like kind of a mid-level city, like not small but not like a what you'd see in the Metroplex, that are really post-COVID. I think we're seeing the larger markets kind of become more cohesive. They're all kind of more on the same page. A lot more collaborations between Dallas and Austin, and Dallas and Houston, and Austin, through the major cities. But then also a lot more breweries opening up, like in like a Tyler, at Amarillo, Lubbock, and Midland. These communities that have a good amount of population, but aren't really within that Texas Triangle, and these for a long time, and I think it might be kind of the thing across a lot of states, is that the breweries outside the metroplexes maybe aren't as high of quality, or maybe a little bit suspicious. But I think that over the past couple of years, the breweries outside of that space have really, really grown in quality. And a lot of that, I think, kind of goes with a lot of the talent in the brewing industry are looking to be able to purchase homes, having kids, and seeing that the quality of life might be a little bit better in a place like Amarillo or Lubbock or Tyler. And so kind of moving out. So it's kind of spreading the talent across the state right now. So it's a really exciting time, to be a brewer here in Texas and to kind of see what's happening. I think that we're seeing a lot more of the growth in our area, or I guess our state, and more so in the taproom brewery kind of model, which I think that's kind of the take across the U.S. right now. But
Isn't that
yeah,
interesting that, you rewind the clock to pre-COVID time and it's like the advice was distribute, get your cans out, your growth model is going to be mass distribution. And then it feels like post-COVID, and COVID probably had something to do with this as well. But now it's back to, maybe it's balanced out is a better way to think about it, is the taproom model, and the margins you gain in the taproom are where growth can be. Are you experiencing that same kind of thing? It's kind of a question for both of you guys: is, do you agree with that? Do you think that trend holds? And do you see that trend with other breweries in Texas? Kind of the Caroline question. And Chris, maybe, do you see that same trend in your taproom?
I think so. Largely, there are challenges with distribution. There are breweries that have a unique foothold and are very good at it, and have whether they're self-distributed or have partners, they've kind of found that place in the market. I think we've seen a story since COVID of a lot of breweries just making sure what they're doing is working, and that might mean pivoting things. So we've definitely had some breweries that have never really been in distribution, but they found that maybe one flagship brand or a couple brands at their brewery are resonating in distro, whether widely or like at niche craftier places within 20 miles of their tap room. So some folks are expanding into it a little bit. I'd say you have a lot more folks that are kind of peeling back from it a bit and doubling down and really focusing on their tap room, maybe opening a second tap room or a third tap room. That multiple locations is definitely a trend we've seen on the rise. We're lucky enough in Texas to have self-distribution. That's something that we've actually always had. We fought for more of it, and we fought for, we didn't have brew pubs specifically in Texas, didn't have the ability to distribute until 2013. So that was a big legislative victory for us before you had this very binary choice in Texas of you could be a brew pub and sell within your four walls. You could sell for there, you could sell to go, but that was it. You couldn't even really viably participate in a beer festival beyond your four walls. Manufacturing breweries, on the other hand, could sell beer into distro, into the market, some limited self-distribution, but they couldn't have a tap room. They couldn't sell you beer by the pint. So we got that in 2013 as well. And then it wasn't until 2019 that we got the ability for breweries to sell, manufacturing breweries to sell beer to go from their tap rooms. So that's been a big part of it. Before 2013 in Texas, there was really no reason to build your brewery with like air conditioning, a comfortable or aesthetic tap room. That really wasn't part of the business, right? Your tap room existed maybe to bring folks out on a tour and maybe give them a $10 glass and they got some free pours in it while they, hung out for the day. But after 2013, when be able to really sell your beer over the bar or be a brew pub and be able to make some money in distro, however limited or wide span you wanted it to be, really made, I think, the industry much more viable, gave people a lot more choice to figure out what model would work for the best for them. And we really had this rise in taproom culture. So it has not been that long in the grand scheme of things that these business
Yeah,
models have
really. You're
even been
saying these
legal in
numbers like,
Texas. Yeah.
less than 10 years ago, this is happening. And
Yeah.
just barely over five, in 2019. I still think 2019 was like last year, but it's not. It's, 6 years ago, 7 years ago now. Uh, what about you? What about you, Chris? I mean, are you very taproom focused? You guys do distro and push stuff out, and how's that working for
no,
you?
yeah, we're 90% taproom sales. We just opened up a second location that's just a public house, just serving our beer at a smaller community about 15 minutes away, about a year and a half ago. So I mean, technically that is distribution. The way the laws are
Mm.
currently set up here in Texas, we are selling beer to ourselves from one license to another license. But I do think that that's the rising growth here is, smaller multiple locations, either with a brewery on site or just, selling your own brands. And I think from our perspective, I mean, it's a great model because we can control the whole thing. Where the way we kind of look at our business is that we're not just selling beer, we're selling an experience. We're creating community, we're selling an aesthetic. And I think whenever we can, have control of the staff, how they're communicating about our beer, how they're selling our beer, making sure that we're cleaning our lines all the time, that we've got top tier equipment. And then, we've got a designer on as one of our partners, and he's kind of making sure that between the two locations, they're cohesive in the visuals, but also unique in each spot. And I really think that's kind of where the growth is going to be. And I mean, Caroline, we were talking about that at the board meeting a week or two ago about how like the breakout in our membership isn't like at this point like majority of on-site taproom type sales, right? Versus the larger distributing breweries or the regional breweries.
Yeah, absolutely. Our membership, just like the kind of breakdown of licensees in the state, is about 2 to 1 brew pub to manufacturing brewery. And our average member either sells 100% of their beer over the bar or a little bit of limited self-distribution. We have plenty of larger craft breweries that do work with distributors and are distributed across the state, but majority are much smaller. And I think another interesting thing about Texas is that because we're such a big state with so many giant markets, 30 million people in the state and major metro areas, very, very few Texas breweries distribute outside of Texas. So
Mhm.
in some ways, we're kind of a
Mhm.
best kept secret that craft beer fans all over the country, there's a lot of folks, unless they have a specific connection to Texas or they happen to get like a few Jester King bottles or, something like that to their local bottle shop, they might not have ever had, a Texas beer outside of like a Shiner Bock or something like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what again something we were talking about offline. I was like, when I moved to Texas, I was blown away by how much craft beer there was. And I was like, and to your point, I guess that's wise. It's like, well, there's plenty of market here for us to work through. Crossing that state border is a big hurdle. Why not just make it work here? And then there's just all this stuff everywhere, which is awesome if you live there and you're like, oh, I get all this craft beer. You're passing through, you get lots of selection. And kind of something else you were talking about with that in mind is like there's all these other communities, kind of micro cities, small towns, big towns, and thinking about your tap room in Lubbock. It's like, well, you could say, well, there's a neighboring city that's some miles, 20, 30 miles up the road or something like that, and there's opportunity there, and I don't have to go across state borders to make that work and distribute there, and I can just it's easier for me to self distribute to that location. And now I've started to expand my empire as a business, which is pretty slick, and a benefit to being such a big state, but being a
Yeah,
state, not multiple, right?
absolutely. Yeah, I think the attitude with a lot of brewers right now is caution. I think, because of the shakeup after COVID, and it kind of was already starting before COVID. I think all the brewers are kind of looking at growth, and growth plans right now are very cautious, very conservative. And I think when you're looking at it, just like back of napkin math, it makes a lot more sense to self-distribute, and especially self-distribute to yourself, or self-distribute within like a 50 to 100 mile radius, and just kind of saturate the area where you already are, versus going for like that 2015, 2017 model of like, yeah, we got to grow, grow, grow. We got to be able to put package multiple types of package and SKUs on shelves and bar taps all over the state and outside of the state. And, I think when we started seeing all that stuff kind of dry up, all of us are a lot more cautious. So there's a lot more appetite to, let's just make the most we can out of the pie that we live in. And then once we kind of, have kind of eaten up the piece that we have here in our community, then let's cautiously move forward.
Do you think there's something to be said about being okay with enough, and not being so, like, I guess I can't think of a better word than like greedy, and saying, well, there's always more opportunity out there, and if we grind towards it, but you could fall into pitfalls if you grind too hard and expand too fast, and then you've got too many costs, and you could kill a brand and kill a good brand and a good business
Oh yeah.
by being too aggressive. But where's that line to being like, I'm good with this. We make money, we pay our people, I live okay. Is there something to be said about that? You think?
I think the thing is that anyone who's gone out and started and opened a brewery has some ego, and the ego just comes from out of the gate, just like, I think I can do that better. Like, I've had the beer here, I think I can make better beer. Or I've been to this location, I think I can make a better experience. So and I mean, for better and for worse, the ego involved is kind of what drives the industry, but then that's also what drives the industry. So I think whether a brewery is really good and soluble and sound as a business with just like one location, there's always going to be a little bit of like, well, my neighbor up the road here, they just got into that market. I got to get into that market too, or I'm going to get into that market and that market. And I think that's a little more toned down than I think it used to be, just because I think that people are seeing the repercussions of that, like I was just saying. But I don't know. Like I think a lot of us who, and Caroline, you probably know way more brewers than I do, having worked with the guild, but I think a lot of us are like, we're high achievers and we just have engines that, go at, we're redlining all the time. And it's hard to just sit still and be like, I really think that if they would distribute some ADHD medication across all the industry, I think that might really help everyone a whole lot. Let us
Go
all just kind of
chill
chill
out.
and be happy
Yeah.
with what we got.
Yes, I feel like over the last couple years I've often gotten the question, and I'm sure we all do too, like, are there too many breweries? Has craft beer just hit a cliff? Or, insert your metaphor that we're tired of hearing about. And I always like to say, like, two things can be true at the same time. What small businesses and entrepreneurs have had to face in the last few years with between the global pandemic, supply chain challenges, tariffs, like geopolitical disruptions, climate stuff that's impacted crop forecasts, like all these things, um, gosh, like you have to give it to entrepreneurs who have found a way to keep their head above water and operate really great businesses in this environment. Like it has been really challenging. At the
Mhm.
same time, I definitely would reject the idea that there are too many breweries in Texas or that we can't support more craft breweries. Um, again, we're 48th in breweries per capita, so we definitely have a lot of population and a lot of folks that we can turn on to craft beer here, and we can support more breweries. But yeah, I think the industry as a whole has definitely gotten more realistic about the idea that not everyone, in fact, 90% of people are not going to be statewide distro breweries or regional distro breweries. They're not going to be the next Sierra Nevada or New Belgium or, these behemoths of craft that the, 90+% of the industry really is going to be that taproom focus or local distribution focus within, 50 or 100 miles of your brewery. Like that's where we really have the opportunity to grow. And
Well,
there's so many challenges in distribution, as we all know that
so
there's
many
only so many
challenges.
taps, so much room on shelves. Like that is where there's really a pinch.
You kind of alluded to some stuff that I wanted to ask you guys about too, is about the consumer and what we think is going on there. And obviously specifically Texas consumer. What's going through their heads right now in the craft beer world? What are people drinking? Do you have a beat on what the trends are like there with how much they're buying and what they're gravitating to and what they want as a consumer in Texas? As a craft beer drinker in Texas? Are there more? Are there less? Are they changing their tastes? What's your take on the consumer side?
I'll jump in on this one. I think that it's hard to make a blanket statement for the state like that. Just kind of like what I was going back to earlier, Lubbock having been a dried county for so long, it was a little more immature of a market here. And that's kind of the case sort of across the state where, I mean, like the first brew pubs that, opened back in 1993 were in Austin and in DFW. So they're going to have much more mature scenes in those places. Then also just thinking about like where larger breweries like St. Arnold having opened up in Houston so long ago, they're going to have more mature palates, and so you're going to see a little more edge, I guess like more like on the edge styles moving in places like that, where other breweries, kind of spread out across Texas might really be leaning more into like, hey, we're competing with Michelob Ultra or we're competing with Tecate or um, more domestic type brands like that. But I do think that across the board, really, oh, I've got a little bee friend here. Hello. I think across, it's easy to say. I think across the board here that because of our immigrant roots here from years and years ago, that loggers have a stronghold on Texas by far. It's few and far between to find a brewery here in the state that doesn't have at least one lager on, if not four or five. And then I also think going back to what Caroline was saying earlier, I think with some of the larger breweries that have really kind of put us on the map nationally, like Jester King, and also Pint House, I think that we see their influence kind of trickle out across the breweries around the state. So I mean, maybe not so many as there used to be, but I think that wild barrel aged fermentation and fruit fermentation, secondary fermentation, those kind of programs. Those were pretty big across the state for a while there. The breweries that could put that together and execute it, correctly. And then also just IPAs. I think IPAs, I mean, they do well
Of course.
everywhere. But I think, really because of, Pine House kind of setting the standard, with their great brand, Electric Jellyfish, I think like I said, every brewery in town, or I think across the state, has at least one lager, at least one hazy IPA, because of that. And what I'm saying might be redundant of every single state, but that is kind of where I see things right now. I mean, I don't know, Caroline, you have a different perspective?
That's true. And I think also our members are responding to a real need to create, like, as they're focused more on the hospitality experience and on the tap room experience, it's about having a great portfolio of beer, right, and having style variety and things that people are coming out for, but they're also focused on having a food program, having some other beverages, so that if there's, three people in the group are beer drinkers but one person's not, they have some quality non-alcoholic or hemp-based, which we could go on a whole soapbox about, or other kinds of alcoholic beverages that that member of the group can enjoy. We have breweries that have disc golf courses, concert venues, soccer fields, concert domes, bookshops, coffee programs, like a real diversity of other experiences that they're kind of incorporating in the tap room, so that multiple folks feel welcome, or maybe folks come back for more visits or longer stays. I think is but definitely breweries are not unique in feeling that their customers' pocketbooks are a bit more pinched these days, or their customer behavior, maybe those customers are going out a little less. So a lot of folks are, I think, focused on how to create experiences that keep people coming back more, or staying longer, or bringing bigger groups of people in, or diversifying revenue with private events, or just doing a little bit of everything while also not losing your brand identity, and what makes you you in the process is a challenge.
It has to be hard, I know it's hard in talking to breweries every day, our clients, and interacting with folks like you. And there's all sorts of challenges that are out there. And, a lot of times it takes a little bit of help, and the guild can be that help. And it's kind of another question I want to ask you is like, what does the guild do in Texas, right? I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but like, what are you guys doing to support, and what are some of these things you're helping with from a marketing perspective or from legislative? How does the guild get involved, and what's that like to be? What's a day in the life like of a guild executive director and interacting with breweries around the state?
Yeah, I really view our mission as kind of four parts, and this will be similar to a lot of guilds across the country. It might just be that formula, the ratios differ a little bit depending on what the state needs. So the big one that's less tangible is community building, right? The fact that our breweries are each other's best resources, and the fact that folks are so collaborative and they can go to each other for advice, troubleshooting, literally to save money off making a costly mistake or trying to clean up the costly mistake they made, is a huge part of what the guild offers, just to be that organized embodiment of that's keeping folks collaborative and united and marching towards common goals, and not going after each other, or viewing that pie as something that's limited, and that folks are fighting each other over. And then the other three parts are really advocacy, education, and promotion. So on the advocacy side, our work at the legislature has been really important over the years in changing Texas beer laws for the better. We're one of only four states where our legislature meets only every other year. So it means that change is slow in Texas and painful.
Mm.
And what the Guild does is can really be an organized force behind that progress. We have lobbyists, we have an in-house government affairs person. Our team is up at the Capitol, dropping off, collateral and beer drops, and lining up people to testify on things, and working with stakeholders to run bills, and to, all of that to try and better our industry. And then also work with our regulators on the rulemaking and kind of clarity seeking side when things between sessions are giving people pain points. So that's a big part of it. It might not be the sexiest part of it, but it's like the work that needs to be done, and the work that really has, in the long run, made the industry, what it is today. And we've got a laundry list of more things that we are fighting for sure. On the education side, we run a couple different conferences throughout the year, our annual meeting and our Texas Brewery Roundup. So bringing folks together for in-person educational learning at those events is important. Throughout the year, we do things like we have guild gatherings, our kind of informal member meetups in our 9 regions of the state, where folks can come together and either just have like unstructured networking time, picking each other's brains, or having a guest speaker in some cases, or sponsor come out and do something interactive, rub some hops, or something like that. And we have a member forum, and we do some occasional webinars, and we have a new kind of peer-to-peer mentorship program. So all these things kind of feed under the education part of our mission. And then on the promotion side, our largest event of the year is the Texas Craft Brewers Festival. It's a big
Yeah.
Yeah, like 5,000 attendees, 80 breweries in Austin every November. So that is our real flagship event where we really bring, the statewide industry together. And folks, it's amazing. We see how far folks travel from to attend that event. And we'll get folks from, upwards of 5 to 10 countries, like 40 states, and like 200 towns across Texas. I mean, that come to the
Wow.
festival. So it's cool as a flagship event. And then we try to support our members having smaller events and festivals and things across the state. We also run a beer competition called the Texas Craft Brewers Cup, which will actually be next weekend. We'll have the award ceremony for that. So stay tuned for some fun news coming out of Texas for
Oh,
sure.
snap.
Yeah. And we've got an app, our Texas Brewery Passport app, where folks can find breweries near them. And we have an interesting program we just launched less than 2 years ago called the Brew City Texas program. So this really responded out of a challenge for us of like, how do we even begin to meaningfully be able to support promotional efforts all over a state this big as a nonprofit with limited resources and budget. So this Brew City Texas program allows us to get closer with convention and visitors bureaus, DMOs, tourism groups, economic development groups around the state in different small towns and big cities. In fact, small and mid-sized towns is really where it's taken off even more so, and been able to kind of help them to kind of realize the value proposition of promoting breweries in their communities and give them some tools to do some extra promotion and events and just see kind of each unique community kind of take off and develop some things of their own. So that's kind of a laundry list. We also have a lot of just different deals and discounts our members can tap into, a job board our members can post on, just some of these resources that we try to stand up as a trade association serving the industry. But we got,
Dang.
like every guild, a small team and a scrappy budget. So we do the best we can and really rely on like board members like Chris and other engaged members of our organization to lean in and help us do the work and cultivate that community.
That is not a small list of things. That's a lot of stuff. And you mentioned an app in there, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. The guild has an app that's like for consumers to have, and then they can like interact and learn about stuff that's going on. And it's like a passport thing. Tell me a little bit about this app. I am fascinated by that. I haven't seen a guild that does that. I know about the apps and things like that, but tell me about this app. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's called the Texas Brewery Passport app. So you can find all our member breweries across the state, and you can check in or you can collect a passport stamp when you visit each one. You can rise across the leaderboard. You can share photos and stuff. Breweries can post like events and promotions in there too, to kind of interact with folks, an extra layer of promotion. And then we actually fulfill rewards. So if you visit a certain amount of breweries in like a 3-year period, you can get some online store discounts, stickers, t-shirt, name on the
That's amazing.
leaderboard, name on the website, things like that. So yeah, we work with a developer to develop the app, and they've worked with several other guilds. So actually Ohio, New York, and a couple other states have apps as well that are pretty similar.
That is amazing. You find that it works, that folks are getting the message out and helps support the breweries around the state.
We always would love more users to use it, of course, but I will say that our users are really, really dedicated to it. And we actually think so the top level you can get is if you visit 200 breweries. So we have a few dozen people who have visited, more than 200 Texas craft breweries
200?
in the
That's
last few
amazing.
years. Yeah, and traveled all around the state. And like they're such fun ambassadors. We post them on social media when they get to that milestone, and they all have such great things to say about how much they've enjoyed like traveling the state and visiting breweries. And some of them have amassed like amazing collections of like stickers and coasters and things in that time. So it's a cool way that like the most dedicated craft beer fans can get really into it, and then the most casual craft beer fans like can download it just to see like, hey, I'm traveling to Lubbock this weekend. Are there any breweries there? And can help them kind of see what's near them.
Wow. Thank you for telling me about that. That is super cool. And I can't wait to see the message when somebody hits 400. You mentioned you got like 400 something breweries in there. That'll be a huge milestone. Wild. Okay. Well, you want to be conscious of your time. I could talk your guys' ear off all day, but just a couple more questions to wrap us up. First question is, kind of pulling out your crystal ball a little bit here, somewhat. And what I want to ask you is like, what is the biggest challenge that you're facing right now? Like 2026, craft beer industry, Texas beer growth, these kind of things. What's the biggest challenge you're facing now, and how are you overcoming that challenge or plan to overcome that challenge for yourself, for your brewery, for the industry? And that's a question for both of you guys.
Chris, do you have thoughts on that for your brewery or for kind of the average brewery? I can think of some things with a guild for sure.
Yeah, I think, alcohol sales are down, beer sales are down just across the nation, and we saw that in our tap room for sure. For us, that hit kind of was mitigated a little bit with the second tap room, kind of also kind of getting online and moving up, so we didn't see too much of a hit across the board. But yeah, I mean, I think what Caroline was saying earlier, like definitely leaning into having something for everybody. THC hemp beverages, NA beverages. We do like a wine-based margarita, a cherry seltzer, just all kinds of stuff so that, anyone coming here has something for them, keeping our food program, really consistent, keeping our events kind of on the line where we've got stuff happening, most nights of the week, but also they're not too intrusive, where people can still just come out and, chill and have a beer. And I mean, I think like I think that the drinking public are kind of coming back around to drinking again, but differently. So I think you hear the term dad strength quite a bit. We see our lower alcohol lagers moving pretty quickly. And really like we'll kind of test to find out where the bottom of the floor is, and we do one. It's like a 3.6 lager that still sells pretty well, and it's not people's first drink, but it's definitely their last one. So I think yeah, the lower alcohol stuff, the larger variety and beverages, and then just like kind of leaning into more like the business is an experience, and it's not so much a brewery. It's kind of experience first. And really like the joke that a lot of us will make is like, I'm dumping a bunch of jugs of wine and flavorings into a tank to make a margarita so that I can have a 8-week lager and a tank next to it. And that's kind of the way I think that we can keep our businesses healthy and moving beverages, no matter what they are, so that we can still, buy wet hops and still go up to, Yakima and Willamette Valley and, pick hops and do all the classic craft beer things and, get the barrels and make the large stouts and get the wild fermentation. Yeah, we're selling, Mexican sodas and or Mexican Coke and Topo Chico and all that stuff so that we can still, keep the craft beer, I guess, alive or whatever.
Responding to consumer tastes and listening to consumer tastes and being humble enough to make that pivot is what I'm picking up from that. That's amazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Caroline, what's your thoughts
Yeah,
on challenges and overcoming?
I think another thing a lot of our members are facing right now, which is again not unique to craft beer, but perhaps a bit unique to craft beer because so many breweries that at that intersection between manufacturing and hospitality is just rising costs, right? Tariffs and other impacts that have led to cost to go up. We definitely have had members share that their ingredients went up 10 to even north of 20% last year. So it's like doing all the things that Chris just said, just to bring additional revenue in and help margins in other areas, to be able to account for the fact that that costs have gone up on not just ingredients, but for new breweries or expanding breweries, or when something breaks on equipment, packaging materials, just your restaurant supplies, rent for our urban breweries has been a huge deal. We've definitely seen more closures and a slowdown in opening in the larger cities where real estate has just skyrocketed, and kind of those warehouse districts that used to be affordable places for breweries to go into have become cool parts of town or have kind of dried up or been
Gentrification, baby.
redeveloped. Yeah. And I would say for us as an association, our we've done a lot of work over the past decade plus to make sure that we're building strong reserves and making smart and thoughtful decisions about the longevity of our organization, and be able to kind of ride some of these waves where our industry has taken some unexpected turns, and certainly didn't expect that it was going to keep growing at the trajectory that it was, for some of those salad years back in, maybe 2013 to 2018, 2019 or so. So I think some things that we've been, when we have closures, that impacts membership dues, that impacts member participation in events. So that impacts, when our members maybe scale back or hiring less folks, that's less team members who are coming out to our events or getting engaged with the guild. And then I think something that maybe we're not putting quite enough focus on as an industry, or I'd like to hear talked about more, is the impact that things are having on suppliers too. Equipment vendors, point of sale, some ingredient folks to a certain extent, merchandise. There's a lot of suppliers and folks that are tangential to this industry that when everyone kind of pulls back and is a little more conservative or not expanding, not getting that big new canning line, not adding new tanks, those folks that have really built their business on this really fast growing industry are now having like mergers and acquisitions or going out of business or just having to really scale back, the level of like travel or sales or marketing dollars they're putting into things. So for us, that's I don't take for granted that that's been an important part of our financial stability as an organization is those folks' investments in our events, our trade shows, and membership. And so trying to make sure that they feel like they're getting value for their membership too, and not just our core membership of brewers is important. And that also we're looking for new partners that could help serve the industry, as more and more breweries are restaurants as well. Looking for folks in the restaurant equipment space or more, other traditional business services that maybe haven't thought of craft beer as a place where they can lean in. So we're facing kind of rising costs just like our breweries because we buy things and we put on events and we have to, deal with that. And we're also kind of facing industry pinching pennies. But I'll say I'm really proud. Our membership was up last year, which is huge. Our participation in our competition this year was up a little bit. So I really do think that Texas brewers, by and large, are really recognizing that we've overcome challenges as an industry before. We've come so far as an industry before to change these laws and to grow and adapt and innovate. And we did it as an industry because we leaned in and we worked together, right? Not because people retreated back into their own individual businesses and
takes a
got
drive. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a good message for all of us to, just be thinking about if we're going to kind of turn the page and get to a kind of that new normal of stability and weather some of these challenges, it will be because folks are working together, I think, and being collaborative and doing what craft brewers do best and not shrinking away or, only
That's
looking out for
amazing.
themselves.
I am inspired just hearing about that.
Oh,
And,
good.
I know some of our listeners are probably inspired too. And this is a perfect segue to say, if you were inspired by what Caroline just said and you want to get involved with the Texas Guild, how do they do that? Where do they go? Do they hit you up? Do they go to the websites? They follow you. What's the way to get looped in and how can they get involved?
Yeah, we have our website is texascraftbrewersguild.org. You can find us on social media, usually as TX Craft Brewers. And we have 7 membership categories. So we do have a lot of ways for different kinds of businesses and organizations to get plugged into the Guild. So not just breweries, but if you're a Texas brewery and planning or a retailer or an industry supplier or service provider or a city or a tourism group or a DMO or a nonprofit or a college or university offering brewing coursework. We have all these different kind of categories for ways that folks can engage. And if you're just a craft beer lover and you just want to learn more about Texas craft breweries, maybe you're planning a trip here and you want to find out what's near you or what's coming up, definitely check out our Texas Brewery Passport app and our Texas Craft Brewers Festival coming up in the fall. And look out for the results of our Texas Craft Brewers Cup. We had almost over 900 beers entered this year. So there'll be about 90 award-winning beers that will be
That is a
announced
coveted
just
prize,
next weekend.
900 beers. That's amazing. And you got to get that app. I'm going to go download it right now just because I want to see it. Chris, what about you? Someone's pumped up. They're like, dude, this guy's so cool in the shades. I want to test this beer, hang out with him. What's the way to get looped in with you? And where's your tap room at?
Yeah, we're in Lubbock, Texas, in the Tech Terrace neighborhood, just south of the university. Yeah, we're at Goodline Beer across most social media platforms. Yeah, we keep all of our stuff. We're pretty Instagram heavy. My partner's photographer. We've got a great designer on staff, so most of our communication is visual. So yeah, that's kind of where you see it. And yeah, if you're coming out this way, either coming in from New Mexico or Colorado, we're a great stop. And if you're going from the Texas Triangle, heading out to New Mexico, Colorado, the West Coast, also yeah, get a lot of traffic via those folks.
Excellent. Well, we will put links to this stuff in the show notes. So don't worry if you didn't write that down, you can just scroll or whatever, and you'll see the links on the post. I am so grateful for both of your time and your expertise and your contribution to the industry. Thank you so much for hanging out and sharing some time with us and our listeners. It's been a pleasure. We should do this again.
Absolutely.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Chris.
No problem. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.